Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's session hosted by The List. This is a session on agency search consultant trends, predictions, and recommendations for agencies, where we're going to be starting right on time today. We have a very large number of attendees for this much anticipated session. So without further ado, we're going to get underway. A couple of housekeeping items to begin with. We will be making a copy of this presentation available for the streaming version on our website following the session. Once it's compiled, we'll also be making a copy of the deck available, so you'll be able to download that as a PDF. And both the links for those assets will be available and sent out to all attendees following the session. So I'll certainly repeat that as we get through the session here. You can also interact with us. We're putting some time aside for Q&A towards the end of the presentation here. And on your menu on the right-hand side there, you'll see a little tab for questions. So please, by all means, interact with us during the Q&A session and ask questions as we go. We'll also be we've got a number of questions we've had submitted prior to this session that we're going to do our best to get answered as well. So we have about an hour slated today. We're going to spend the first 20-25 minutes going through the material itself. So we leave a good portion of the webcast available for you to ask questions of both Russell and Jerry. So let's move on from here. Today's session is exploring the trends and predictions in what agency search consultants and brand procurement groups are looking for from today's agencies, and the responsibility that you as the own as part of the integral part of the equation. So for this session, we've partnered with agency search and optimization consultants Russell Woolworth and Jerry Priest of External View to provide everyone here exclusive insight into some of the shifts on the marketer landscape, as well as in the agency search process from the front lines. So this session allows for, as I mentioned, an in-depth Q&A opportunity with two of the leading search consultants in the industry, and it's been designed specifically with agency leadership and business development teams in mind. My name's Dave Curry. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer here at The List, and I'm joined today by Russell Woolworth, one of the principals of External View Consulting Group, as well as Jerry Priest, Senior Consultant. And thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining me on the session today.
Our pleasure.
I'm going to be handing over presentation rights to Russell in a moment as we go through into the session agenda today. There's a few key areas that we're going to be covering. First of all, obviously the trends from the past year, some of the predictions and what might be moving forward, what we see in the marketplace moving forward, the ownership by clients or marketers, agencies, and search consultants, implications, and then Q&A. So we're going to hand over presentation rights here to Russell, and Russell, by all means, it's yours to pick up from here.
Great, thank you, Dave. Is that working okay now?
We can all see your screen. You should be good to go.
Okay, and Jerry and I are going to do sort of a back and forth to some degree, and we spent a lot of time talking about these points, and what we're going to do is talk about each point and then give you sort of an implication. Some of the trends may seem obvious, but the implications may not be so obvious. So we're going to start with the first of 4 or 5 trends, which is the new business volume is quite high, and this is sort of a good news, bad news story. If you look at all the data, 4A's new business report, the press, we meet with our fellow consultants on a regular basis. 2013 was a watershed year for new business, and we're sort of surprised by the fact that 2014 has come out so hard swinging at the gate. So a couple of points I want to make is, the good news is there's lots of new business to be had. The bad news is there's going to be a lot of business that's going to be up for review. So while you may win a lot of business, there's a lot of people going to be losing business. So what we recommend, and we're just really picking up a trend of, clients just seeming to be perpetually unhappy. I think they're looking at something in the future that may or may not be possible. A lot of unhappiness with their current agency. So the good news is you've got a lot of opportunities. Don't blow it like so many agencies do, and get that bad case of new business fever and pitch everything that's not pitched down. But remember that at the end of the day, it's much better for your bottom line to maintain and grow existing businesses. And Jerry and I spend a lot of our time We'll talk about this a little later, making sure relationships run smooth. So again, a lot of business to be had, a lot of business to be lost. And if 2014 continues like January and the beginning of February, it's going to be another banner year. We move on to the next trend, marketer promiscuity. And I hope everybody loves our little graphics here. That what's happening is this is not good news. The promiscuity, to a great degree, is rooted in a desire by clients to save money and to use agencies on a project basis. And a lot of the work that we're seeing, a lot of the revitalization work we're doing, clients are asking for multiple agencies. What's not to like? You can get better thinking across many agencies. You don't have to pay the fees associated with an AOR relationship. And from a client perspective, there's nothing greater to have agencies fighting for your business, because that brings out this great level of competitive heat, and ultimately they can be played off one another and will undercut one another on price. Jerry and I think this is pretty destructive practice because, unless the client is a strong brand steward, and let's face it, not every client is a strong brand steward, we think the brand can get diminished quickly as, each agency that wins a pitch brings its own point of view, and it becomes highly executional. And it was interesting looking at Super Bowl this year. You saw a couple of examples where the Volkswagen work wasn't done by Volkswagen's AOR, the T-Mobile work that everybody likes so much wasn't done by their AOR, and we watched a lot of clients go back and forth between these models. So the implication for you is that we think is that client-agency relationships are fundamentally changing. We've seen this for a while, moving to a more project-based relationship, and you really need to rethink your business model and your financial plan. Don't construct it around guaranteed revenue streams. I will also bring up very quickly that we're also doing a lot of work for our clients and some of our other practice areas looking at in-house agencies. So the sacrosanct bond of client and agency and exclusive marriage is being broken. Employee retention. Jerry, you want to talk about this one?
Yeah, just kind of dive in here, Russell. One of the things that we see increasingly, and it causes great anxiety with a lot of the clients and marketers that we work for, is that retention worsens at the agencies. And I know Russell's going to share some data with you in a moment. But in general, many of our clients get very concerned because they view an agency relationship as we're renting your creativity, we're renting your minds, we're renting your insights, and of course all that comes from people and from talent. And there's an increasing amount of agency turnover that clients recognize and become concerned with. So we're actually beginning to proactively probe with agencies, and if we engage with you, one of the things we're going to be asking, and I think other search consultants will be doing the same, is what are your plans for retaining people? How do you retain them? What development, training, and professional growth kind of offerings do you have to keep people around? If you've got a limited number of key people on a critical assignment, how do you provide continuity and provide for some consistency of that talent? Russell, you've got some data, I know you.
Yeah, and I should add that a significant amount of our practice is in the relationship management area, where we're running evaluations for clients. And the big ugly that's come out in the last 2 years or so is the increasing unhappiness with clients over agency turnover rates. Before the financial downturn, agency turnover rates were tracking at about 24 to 26% versus general business at about 18%. Adweek reported recently that they believe the agency turnover is now running in the 30% range, which basically means that almost 1 in every 3 client or agency people who go to work on January 2nd won't be there on December 31st. And, clients are understandably angry about the lack of continuity, and they complain about the need to constantly retrain personnel. In a new business, the joke has always been the client always says, well, is this pitch team the people are going to work on our business? Now they're starting to ask, how do I know, what are you doing for new business retention? And, it's clearly hitting those with strong digital and social skills. We're losing them to, media owners and status. So the implication for you is And we're starting to ask these questions in searches is, what are you doing to mitigate, attrition, and how do you hold on to your stars, whether it's continuing education or providing financial incentives or just finding, ways to keep a group of people who are notoriously fickle when it comes to employment and don't live by, our old school rules of working your way up the ladder. So these are things you should be thinking of. It's probably the biggest issue right now that we're seeing in retention, and one we're starting to ask an increasing amount of questions in new business. Agency differentiation. Jerry, let me just start off with this, and I'll let you sort of chime in. This is driving me crazy because what's happening is in today's multi-channel world, agencies are trying to, I think, say that they do everything in coming up with these all-inclusive positionings like we connect consumers to brands and we create passion for brands. We're a new generation hybrid agency. The bottom line is we have no idea what the hell you do for a living. And, you're trying to distinguish your agency by the way you think, but it's just becoming a parody. The thing that we have figured out, because I will issue this challenge to everybody in the audience, go and look up a bunch of agency websites and see if you can figure out what they do for a living. The way that we get the answer to that question is asking for a pie chart of where your revenue comes from, and that's what you do for a living. But it's really becoming difficult, and I really implore you to provide some context. You can have a nice positioning, but let us know what you do. If you're a cow, a horse, etc. Jerry, anything to add on this point? Which
Russell and I've come to believe that this is maybe the most underdeveloped area of agency marketing and selling of your services. And we understand it's a double-edged knife. We understand that the temptation to say we're an agency that can do it all, and in many cases you are. But to the extent you can be really crisp and really sharp about what your core strength is, what your fundamental core differentiating and distinctive factors are, the better you're going to be when it comes to showing up on our radar and on the radars of search consultants in general for specific kind of needs, because those searches tend to be fairly narrow and fairly specific. And if you're a jack of all trades, you're a master of none, or at least that's the way it appears, and that's the way a lot of clients view the general and broad agency statements about their capabilities. Another area that we see as a continuing trend is that CMOs have been getting squeezed for some time, and we think it's going to continue. But marketing budgets are getting squeezed anew. CFOs, Chief Financial Officers, and CEOs are putting increasing pressure, as are the boards of directors, on CMOs because marketing continues to be the last holdout, the last area that doesn't have a clear ROI attached to it. So even areas like research and development now, boards can point to pretty specific ROI numbers for those areas, and they can justify and rationalize why we're spending dollars in those areas. Because marketing is such a significant expense for a lot of businesses, and because it's so difficult / impossible to come up with an ROI there, it's just getting increasing pressure. We don't think it's going to change. It's going to get more severe.
And Jerry, I don't want to get into this right now, but I hope it comes up in the Q&A. The solution is not to cut people to lower your costs.
Yep. One of the ways that this plays out is agencies are now often up against pretty strong negotiators on the marketer side. In some cases, these are professional procurement people that are pretty skilled negotiators and essentially professional negotiators. And as an ex-procurement guy myself, part of what I see time and time again is agencies are just getting their butts kicked when they go into these negotiations because they just haven't done the preparation that the other side has done. So the other side has deliberately sat down and thought through what are our options, what are the give and take points we want, what do we have to have, what are we willing to concede, what do we want to ask for if we concede something, where the agency tends to walk into these things much less prepared and often kind of does it on the fly when they get in the room to negotiate, and at that point it's already too late, and there's a real mismatch in negotiation that we see going on, and there's obvious implications here for agencies and what you'll have to do to accommodate that.
We should also add Jerry knows what of he speaks because he was a former staff professor at Procter & Gamble where he worked for a couple of decades and taught negotiation skills. Let's go to the predictions, what we see coming down the line. And again, some of these are not necessarily eye-opening. It's the scary implications underneath them. And let's start off with the first implication, which is, just we're going to see unprecedented volatility. The marketing world is changing, and you'll see a little later on it's freaking out some of our clients. And you just need to be prepared for a world that's always changing. The core skills of agility, flexibility, rethinking your operating model for a very, very different future. We see some very innovative agencies doing this. Most of the agencies we talk to are still living in a very old, conventional media world, and it's they're going to have a very difficult time, and we think it's going to get a lot worse before it gets any better. Jerry, do you want to talk a little bit about the continuous improvement model?
Sure.
Or we can do that a little later on. I don't know if this is the right point for that.
I think that's on our next slide. And
okay.
Another trend that we see here, in addition to the fact that clients seem to be moving towards more and more project-related assignments, and so agencies have to just adjust to become leaner, lighter, faster, and look at things like on-demand kind of models, is we believe that there's going to be some brands and marketers out there that call an occasional tech timeout. What we mean by this is marketers, in some cases, we see them being overwhelmed by the explosion of technologies and innovations in a number of areas, whether it be social media or any number of other areas. And it looks like a continuous change process, in that every time the marketer picks his or her head up, here's a new initiative, a new change, a new thing that's emerging in the marketplace, and they try to drill that into their marketing operations and operating systems. And as a result, nothing's stable. Nothing stabilizes for long enough for the metrics to be relevant, because you end up with apples and oranges. Nothing stabilizes long enough for the marketer to catch their breath and think about strategically where we want to go. And so the change we think that some are going to do is they're going to call a tech timeout and allow the system to stabilize, and they're going to tell the agency, don't keep throwing new stuff at us every time you discover it. When you discover it, keep it in the back room for 6 months or for 9 months, whatever the right time is, and then issue a version 2.0, if you will, so that we take a series of changes, we swallow them at once. Our system can then adopt to those, digest those, stabilize, and we can run for another 6 months before the next version 3.0 comes at us. So we think this is a trend you're going to see more of.
And Jerry, I want to add a little observation. We meet with not just one client, but sometimes a lot of different clients, and it's almost bragging rights they're throwing around about which technology the other person is using. And I think with so much social media and so much stuff in the ad press, clients are asking, why don't we do this? And we're trying to tell clients, the typical script, the typical brief from a client is, we want to get out of conventional media. We want to shift our dollars to digital and social. We want to have greater impact, and we want to get involved on a much more visceral level. And the problem is we're trying to teach our clients, let's not throw out channels here. Let's figure out what the problem is, because I would argue that every channel is appropriate. The question is, what do you want to do and who do you want to do it to? So we're trying to train our clients to not barking out orders about which channels they want to be in, because sometimes they're not the appropriate channels. Speaking of marketers, the next point is, we've just seen this has become crazy with the, I'm not talking about CMO necessarily attrition, which actually is getting a little bit better. The average longevity of CMOs increased by a couple months. The problem that we're seeing is this madness where a client comes in, and I understand that the client has been given the mandate to create change, and who wouldn't want their own team? But I think we're creating a lot of destruction here. TD Ameritrade is a great example of 3 clients, 3 CMOs in pretty much a year and a half. Each time a new CMO came in, the agency was fired within a couple of weeks or so. We try to explain to clients that there's a lot of institutional learning, in that firing and hiring an agency is not as simple as the time you're going to take in review. We think it takes about 18 months to bring an agency fully up to speed, and we'll talk about this a little later on. We want marketers to spend as much time improving relationships as they do changing relationships. We think this is a board of board level issue, and I'm hoping that some brave board will step up and say, why are we doing this madness? So I don't know if that's going to happen or not, but it's really becoming quite destructive. Here's something that affects us and you. The share of searches is continuing to shift from search consultants to marketers, and we estimate, based on some work that we've done with the ANA, some surveys, that marketers are doing about 85% of all searches now. And there's a couple of implications. First of all, most agencies tell us that they like when a search is led by a consultant, so as opposed to a client. So you're going to have to deal with clients a lot more. And remember earlier we were talking about, we think there's going to be more pitches this year. Well, more of those are going to be led by clients. Some of the implications are that search consultants are also suffering and looking for different revenue streams. So we'll talk about our model later on. There's a lot of people out there trying to sell stuff, but at the end of the day, we don't think this is a positive development. And I'm talking, first of all, from our own self-interest, but we also think that procurement is starting to own this space. One bright spot is that Jerry and I have been hired by procurement departments to act as a consultant in the background where they're running a search, which we think is actually not a bad way to go. It's when the procurement department runs a search and doesn't really understand what they're doing, it can be very damaging. So this is scary to us, and it should be scary to you. Jerry, anything to add on this one?
No, I think it's well said.
Let's talk about ownership. We think there's a lot of confusion here based on the number of calls and emails I get from the agency, so we'd like to make some clarity about, in the new business process, who owns what. And we're going to start with the client. And you need to understand that we're, at least for our model, we're getting paid on a project basis. And the value we bring to a client is our experience and knowledge. They're paying for our opinion, but at the end of the day, if we recommend starting with 10 agencies and they want to do 100, they own the search. So it's very difficult when agencies ask us to try and change things. You got to understand the client owns the process. They can choose to listen to us, or they can choose not to listen to us. It's all up to the what the marketer wants to do. So, Jerry, anything on this to add about this fundamental?
We work hard to try to find the best matches for them, and if we believe your agency is the best match for them, we try to make that point, and of course we try to influence the process. And as Russell said, they pay us for our opinions. We give our opinions, but that doesn't mean they always listen to them. So there are different models. We'll talk more about that in a few minutes, but for now we want you to just recognize that really the client, the marketer, owns the entire process from a broad standpoint.
I'll just start this, Jerry, and let you chime in. And they also own the selection criteria, and it's everything from agency size and to geography to your credentials and capabilities, even to your operating model. And we're always getting agencies who tend to think only on their side. Gosh, I'd love to work with this client, and they're never considering the client side. First of all, our clients are putting their job on the line every time they do a search, so they really want to make sure, it's our philosophy up front to do a thorough vetting. And this criteria is really thoughtfully considered, and it goes up and down the corporation, sometimes all the way up to the CEO. And agencies are always saying, oh, that's ridiculous. The client's on the East Coast. What an idiot. They should know that it's not a problem to work with a West Coast agency. Well, you know what? If they've made the decision that they want somebody in the same time zone, you're not going to challenge them on that. Typically, we don't blow up the criteria. So we also ask you to, we'll talk a little bit about this a little later, but really read into the search. If it's a big brand, it's a $200 to a $500 million brand, they're looking for a lead branding agency. If you've got a 40-person shop and you've got the local Coca-Cola bottlers and you've got no experience or the agency experience running as the lead brand shop, you're just not right for that search. Jerry, anything more?
The other thing that I think is hard for agencies to see sometimes is the amount of time and energy that has gone into these kind of decisions. So while you may question whether it's the right decision or not, please recognize that by the time the search becomes public and it's out there, and there may be a short list or a long list of agencies in the consideration set, a lot of thought, hours and hours and debate and pros and cons of what kind of agency do we need to look for? Why does the agency need to have these kind of geographical boundaries? Why is it a big agency? Why should it be holding company or independent? Why should it be this kind of agency versus that kind of agency? Those things have been agonized about for hours, and sometimes for weeks. And there's a lot of people inside the marketer organization that have to be aligned to those kind of things. So generally speaking, even though you may disagree with some of the criteria that show up in the public space, there has been a pretty thoughtful process that's gone behind this kind of selection criteria.
The next point is the client also owns the consideration set. One of the first questions we ask is, who would you like to see in this search and who do you not want in this search? And a lot of times marketers have had previous bad relationships with agencies, and they just say, we don't want them in. We can't necessarily share that information with you. But at the end of the day, our philosophy is to start with a small, long list, but we really need to go. Again, the client owns the search, and client, at the end of the day, owns the consideration set. And if the client's brother-in-law who has a 4-person agency that's located in Europe, they want him in, we're going to let him in. Hopefully they don't win the pitch, but again, you got to understand that they own this at the end of the day. We make suggestions.
Another thing that we think there's an implication around is the clients are responsible for the background information that goes into a search process, and we try to help and coach and support them to the extent that's possible, because we believe that the sharper and crisper a business brief is, or a marketing brief is, or a media brief is, the better solution that they're going to end up with at the end. And as part of that, we encourage agencies to be pretty proactive about how you look at these things when they show up on your radar screen. If you receive an RFI, take a look at the background information, not only for its content, but take a look for how well it's developed, how well it's prepared, how granular it is. And you're going to have to make judgment calls about which pitches you choose to pursue and which ones you don't choose to pursue. And we frankly feel like agencies would be better served to walk away from some of these reviews if the background information isn't clear, isn't concise, doesn't really communicate effectively what is being sought from the agency. There's a whole bell curve of how good and effective these things are, and those things at the bottom end of the bell curve, we would caution you about how much energy you want to put into pursuing that chunk of business.
And don't be afraid to challenge a client if you're not getting the right information. In fact, I always respect agencies who ask me a question, why did you bring me in this pitch, or challenge certain aspects. I think agencies are always worried about going to clients. I personally think more of you, and I like somebody who's discriminating and not ready to jump in. Bottom line, if you don't get the information you want, don't play. Okay, now we're going to talk about a little bit of the search consultant, or actually, I'm sorry, this is the agency owns, which this is a pretty confusing area. Again, just a quick bullet point. We work for the marketer. We're the messenger. Try not to shoot us. We're carrying out orders. We have opinions. We're not robots. We certainly have strong opinions, but we're the messenger. The decision to compete is yours. One of the biggest problems we see is agencies that just pitch way too much, and agencies always. I hate when an agency says that, we really didn't want to pitch, but we didn't want to disappoint you, Mr. Search Consultant. You know what? We really appreciate you being upfront and truthful. We may be a little disappointed, but I'd much rather know upfront that if you can't put 110% into this, you're not going to pitch, as opposed to doing a half-assed job and pulling out in the, the first round or something. So don't be afraid. No search consultant I know, and I think I know most of them, will hold it against you if you don't participate. This is up to you, and if you're going to do it, pitch to win, and if you're not going to do it, no harm, no foul. We're going to talk in a minute about how to get on the radar screen, but the level of fame is up to you. We are not your agents, and we get a lot of emails from agencies asking about, they can't wait to partner with us. We don't partner with agencies. We work with clients. And while we like to bring highly qualified agencies into a pitch, it's your job to get on the radar screen. And, don't put us in an awkward spot of trying to boost your agency. We do have opinions, but I get the feeling that in a lot of cases, agencies are looking for us to do the selling. That's not our job. We'll be talking in a minute about, materials and whatnot. And, to that point, you own the response. And by the way, we're seeing, because last year was probably such a big new business year, Jerry and I saw a lot of what we call cookie cutter responses, that the degree of personalization was probably limited to the name of the client on the first page and, maybe the letter inside. So again, you own the response, and we have seen there's nothing more awkward for us than saying, I know this is a terrible response, but trust us, this agency is really good. That puts us in a really awkward spot because now we're putting on our shoulders. We are hoping that your materials will carry the day, but please do not depend on us to sell you. We're neutral to the degree that we explain what we believe the playing field looks like, but this year, maybe because of all the new business, we saw a lot of what I would call substandard materials. Jerry, anything to add to that?
Cookie cutter responses are the worst thing that we can see there. And we will try, if we believe that you're the right agency, we'll still push and try to do the right thing. But then we get in this spot of, well, gee, if I'm advocating for agency A, do I also have to advocate for agency B, C, and D? And it's awkward for us. But aside from awkward for us, far more important is that it puts you in a very bad light. So please, no cookie cutter RFI responses.
Now, how do you get, speaking of the radar screen, we work with a list, and the list has over 9,000 agencies on there. So one of the first parts to getting on the radar screen is getting your information into the database, which is really simple. All you need to do, go to our website, click on that, the third menu from the right, agency registration, and you can go into the agency profile builder. We recommend you check, your profile out, maybe once a year or something, or more often if something's changed. Really simple and really helpful. Jerry, you want to hit this one?
The other advantage here, we use the list, and we encourage you to use the list. We use it as our database. We don't have a separate database. Some search consultants do that. We don't. We use the list because we think it's the best one in the industry. And your being registered in there helps us understand who you are in a very searchable and user-friendly kind of way. It also helps you in a number of other areas because a lot of people use that database. And the folks that run this, Dave and his team, are, do a lot of work that is connected to Daily Vista and Catapult, and they can be expert advisors and provide a lot of support for agencies in helping you grow your business in a lot of different ways. But just being registered in the list is kind of the foundational, fundamental groundwork for all of that.
We've only got a couple more slides here, and then last is what the search consultant owns. And the first thing we want to make it clear to everybody out there is there are very different kinds of models. Each search consultant runs something slightly different, and I would encourage you to, if you're involved in a consultant-led review, to talk to the client, understand what they're looking for, because everybody's different. We like to start with a small, long list. I know some like to start with a large, long list. We encourage constant contact with agencies. Agencies always tell me that, oh, we didn't want to bother you, and I hate when they're telling me that when I tell them they didn't make it past the first round because their materials really didn't answer what we were looking for. And the reality is, again, we're being paid by marketers, so you're not bothering us. You're allowing us to do our job. And to me, the sort of hidden secret is when you look good, we look good. There's also, two different kinds of models in terms of remuneration. And we have chosen that we do not take any kind of fees from agencies. We are paid by the client marketer. There are many search consultants out there that have relationships with agencies, and we have just chosen not to do that because we think it creates somewhat of a conflict of interest. But if you are, paying somebody, money for whatever it may be, you probably should be looking for more services coming out of that than we would necessarily provide. So I want to wrap up here with the implications of, Jerry, you want to take us through, bottom line, and we'll go into Q&A.
Sure. We think the major implications for agencies are four. And the first one there, kind of the 12 o'clock position in the visuals, is the notion that agencies have to become sharper and sharper at defining, not only for us, but for clients, who they are, what their core expertise is, what their core capabilities and core strengths are. And as I mentioned earlier, we've come to believe that this is perhaps the most underdeveloped area of agency marketing and selling. So the sharper and crisper an agency can be about who you are and who you're not. Oftentimes the best way to describe that is to tell us who you are not. We think that serves you much better in the long run. Moving to the right there, clockwise, you'll see a pile of coins. And the notion there is that we think agencies have to become increasingly sensitive to cost. Not that agencies aren't already that, but marketers are increasingly attentive to cost. And so our suggestion for agencies is get out in front of that. Be effective and efficient in how you manage third-party spending and how you manage the client's money, because they're thinking about it, they're wondering about it. And before they ever ask the question, we encourage you to create your story around this, get good back office hygiene, get effective procurement methods yourself, put those in place, track your costs for overhead, track your costs for personnel, track your costs for office space, track your costs that you spend on third-party production services and things like that. Create a good story and proactively build this into your capabilities presentation. You'll do yourself a huge favor by getting that on the table proactively and not waiting until the client asks, because I promise you they're already thinking about it. Continuing clockwise in the 5 o'clock position, the visual there is to suggest that we think agencies have to begin to rethink their entire operating model. As things move more and more towards project kind of assignments, there's a demand to get leaner, lighter, faster, more and more on-demand kind of services. And many of today's agency models are just not built to support that, and we think that puts that agency at a disadvantage. So take a hard look at your operating model. And then in the bottom left, the arm wrestling, think about your negotiation skills, think about your negotiation capability from a professional, deliberate standpoint. Are you throwing people into negotiations who are well prepared, thoroughly trained, and fully capable of representing you in a powerful way? If you're not, you're going to lose, because you're up against people increasingly who can do that. Agencies have to get deliberate about building their negotiation capabilities. And then there's an implication for the marketer here too, and of course the marketer is promoting, but one of the things that we keep suggesting consistently to marketers, just so that you're aware, is we believe marketers have to become much more attentive to improving and building their existing agency relationships rather than spending so much time on going to find a new one. There's times when it's very appropriate for clients to go find new agencies, but there's also times where the energy is much better spent working on the client relationship and improving what's wrong in the relationship, because many times agencies, they're with good agencies already, and just as much time and effort and energy is taken to find a new one that's really no better than would be spent if they working on the relationship. So we think that's important, and just so you know, we tell this to marketers every time we have the opportunity.
And I'm happy to report that even though we did 15 searches last year, the majority of our time was invested in improving relationships with marketers and their various ad agencies. Dave, do you want me to hand it back to you right now, or should I continue to press forward?
That's fine. I think thank you very much, Russell and Jerry. You certainly got the, we loaded in a couple of the questions, which I think, watching the stream of material come in from the audience, there's a few questions in here that we've preloaded in that are, I think, appropriate to address right out of the gate. So if you'd like to scroll through a couple of those, we can, I'll pepper in a few as we go through this as well.
Okay. Jerry, you want to take this first one?
Sure. What type of searches are run by consultants and who hires us? We think it behooves agencies to just stand back and take a 30,000-foot view of the marketplace and recognize that because we charge we charge marketers a fee for the services we provide during a search, almost by definition, the people that are going to hire search consultants tend to be those with larger marketing budgets, with more sophisticated demands, have more sophisticated marketing requirements, are more challenging kind of requirements. So it's the big companies. They tend to be more global. They tend to be huge because in so many cases, if they have a relatively smaller, modest marketing budget, it just doesn't make sense for them financially to pay the fee that we have to charge for our services for a search. So particularly for smaller agencies, we know this isn't something that those agencies will want to hear, but the reality is we just don't have a lot of small pieces of business that get run through search consultants. By definition, most of those pieces of business tend to be big, complicated, global, sophisticated marketing needs.
Jerry, one of the questions that sort of is a follow-up to that asked by Lisa online here is the criteria that you guys use to determine whether you'll take on a client or not.
That's a great question. One of the nicest things about doing this is that we have walked away from opportunities. The criteria we're looking for is we try to get a sense of fair play. There are a lot of clients who know who they want to hire and are looking to validate the process through from procurement's eyes and their corporate rules by running a search. But we look at, who is the client, what's their track record, what do they like as people, just like what you look for in an agency. Do we have similar cultural fit? We tend to work with innovative clients who are really sort of on the cutting edge and not looking, we don't work with a lot of dead brands looking to rearrange the deck chairs, but we look for honesty, integrity. We also, a lot of clients will call up and say, look, I need a new agency and I need one in 2 weeks. We say, sorry, you can't do a diligent process. So bottom line is we're looking for a compatible partner who will allow us to run a fair process and will allow us to have a voice. Should I go on to this next question?
Yes, thanks, Ross. Sorry, I had we were just on mute there for a moment.
Okay. This next one is actually really good and interesting. What's the difference between public issue and private search process? We get this all the time where agencies say, hey, when are you going to release the RFI? Government institutions in the public sector have a legal requirement to post RFIs in a public place, so anybody who wants to can get involved. We're working in the private sector. We tend to work with smaller long lists. A lot of times we have confidential information in the briefs. You need to sign an NDA. So we typically don't just post an RFI somewhere. We're working behind the scenes, and there's a whole lot of difference because the private sector can hire who they want to, when they want to. Are you an agent for...
One of the things that this makes us think of is we really don't sit on opportunities and we wait for somebody to call and say, hey, let us see your pool of opportunities. It just doesn't work like that. So we oftentimes, almost always, I can't think of a time when we haven't, we have to sign our own NDAs with marketers, and we go into great detail with them and a lot of background about what do they need, why do they think they need that, and we'll challenge that, and there's internal debate, there's internal alignment. And by the time something gets out there in the marketplace, it has already been pretty well vetted, and the long list that we've arrived at, which may or may not include you as an agency, has been something that we've very thoughtfully arrived at. So the question is almost void because we don't sit on opportunities. The opportunities we have for you are the ones we've already called you to talk about. If we haven't called you to talk about them, that means we just don't have them that we think you'd be suitable for. And again, the best way to be on our radar screen to help us understand what you would be suited for is to have a good, accurate listing in the list and to keep us current as to what your latest information is. Russell, maybe you've got some thoughts on how folks can do that too.
Yeah, I mean, we also like to we encourage you to send work samples in a digital form. We have a separate server of several terabytes that we keep agency materials on, so it's nice to have your information in the list. It's also nice to get some work samples. It's sort of the yin and the yang. Your credentials and your capabilities combined with your work give us a full picture.
Electronically, please.
Yes, yeah. We don't keep paper files of anything. And I like reading your nice coffee table books, but please send it to us in digital form as well. How's the search consulting business changing? Well, we talked to some degree about this, about the fact that it's, it's changing in that procurement's, eating the lunch to some degree. I also think that there's a lot more competition. We have to pitch for business. We always did. We have to pitch for almost every account right now. And I do think there's a lot more people in this. You go to the 4A's website, which maintains a list of search consultants. You'll see that list. I don't know. Last time I looked, there were 60, 80 people on there. So it's a lot more people in this business.
Russell, a question from the attendees here from Gordon regarding this. To a degree, what's the trend in pay-for-performance agreements, perhaps, in what you're seeing in the consulting business?
Well, let me give one, and Jerry, you may give another. I mean, we were very bullish on these, but I got to tell you, after working in this for about 5 or 6 years, we're finding a lot of them are not working, and that's because either we can't define the criteria. There's an argument the criteria is so complex that it takes 9 months to figure out how to bonuses. One client said to me, can't we just pay him a bonus and forget about all this stuff? So pay to performance, I think, is a great system. The problem is implementing it. Jerry, do you have anything to add on that one?
No, you've hit the nail on the head. Everybody wants to do it. Everybody talks about it, and we find very few of them that work effectively that both parties are happy with. And it doesn't mean we're giving up on it, but we see a lot of time and energy being spent there, and usually one party or both are frustrated with it.
Once I see, oh, this is a really good question. Once I see it, I assume the search in the press, how can I get into it? I have bad news for everybody who say, when we do a prominent pitch, it's not uncommon for us to hear from 200 to 300 agencies once it appears in the press. And the bad news I have to deliver to everybody is once it's in the press, we've probably been working on a search for 6 to 8 weeks. It's way too late. Maybe once in 15 years I found an agency that I thought was really unbelievable, but for the most part, once it's in the press, the train has left the station, and people say, well, can't you let us in? That means for us to restart a process, which we typically would not do. Let's see what the next thing is. How do I read the code in the press leak? The code, which I think this is referring to, is what I was talking about earlier. We have some agencies, every time there's a search, they say, hey, how about us? I don't think they ever read what the search is about. To me, what I think reading the code means is really understanding at a deeper level what's the search all about. Again, a big brand marketer, it's a $400 million account. Chances are a little agency that has not worked as a lead brand marketer for anything is going to appear. It's hard to understand what the dollar volume is. The geography is always surprising, but I will tell you there's a major move. Despite all the great technology we have to having your agency 1 to 2 time zones away. We don't speak in miles, but we speak in time zones. So I would look thoroughly. I mean, we don't mind being bothered, but we do have an obligation to get back to everybody. And the reality is most of the time of those 200 to 250 agencies, most of them are really not capable. I mentioned this last year, we did a search for Porsche. Half the people said, I have 2 Porsches in my garage. Well, that would make you the perfect agency then for us. Stuff like that really doesn't necessarily cut it. So think twice before you approach us. We're happy to listen to it, but, don't argue with us. How can I just get the chance?
This is just a chance to pitch.
So this question's come in a variety of different ways in the last couple of minutes, guys. So I put this one in because it's really, I think the next slide along, I put in a couple of more pieces there in terms of getting in front of you guys. And that seems to be an overwhelming volume of questions around, Russell, Jerry, how do we get in front of you guys to question number 1, and then what's the right reach and frequency, who should lead that dialogue, and then secondly, you talked quite a bit about procurement now running a lot more as a percentage of overall searches, and the best way to get in front of procurement groups.
Well, I'll speak first. I mean, I enjoy talking with agencies. Keep in mind we're probably hearing from 50 agencies a week. Everybody wants to have lunch. Everybody wants us to fly out to their office. It's just not possible. You multiply that times 52, and that's a lot of visits and stuff. But what we do like to do is what I hate is when someone says, oh, can we talk on the phone? I want to describe my agency. That's about as exciting as having a movie script read to you. We'd like to see your materials. We'd like to get some background information. Nothing turns us on more than great week great work or a fantastic reel or something really innovative. And again, cookie cutter materials, when we do a search, clients are always pulling out the file. Here's the agencies we've talked to and the file, or have been contacting us over the years. The file's generally large, but they pull out 2 or 3, and those are the ones that have made a customized letter, really, demonstrating some understanding of what their situation is and some ability to fix their situation, not just the puff piece about, we're the brand engagement agency and we love clients. You want to be much more specific. Jerry?
Yeah, in terms of how to get in front of the marketers or how to get in front of procurement specifically, I think one of the best things agencies can do there, and I know we've mentioned this before, is to be really crisp about who you are and who you are not. We're a great, engagement, full-service agency doesn't help at all. So the more specific that is, the more you will catch marketers' eyes. And in terms of procurement, I would add to that what I talked a little bit about earlier, which is I think agencies have to be proactive about telling their story in terms of cost control and cost management. And there's a general sense among marketers that agencies tend to be fast and loose with dollars, that the dollars come from the agency or the dollars come from the marketer, and the agency turns around and spends those not cavalierly, but pretty close to it. And I know that's not a fair representation, but I'm telling you that's the perception out there. And I think agencies have to be proactive in overcoming that by crafting a story around how good we are at managing costs, how attentive we are to it. And as I mentioned earlier, I would drill that right into my basic capabilities presentation and address the question because it's in the back of their minds. And by doing that, I think you're out in front of the challenge and you're controlling the conversation instead of reacting to a procurement person who's already collected a bunch of benchmark data and now is going to hold you accountable to some secret benchmark that he or she has in a spreadsheet behind the scenes.
Let me rapid fire through some of these. We've talked about, how do we get on your radar, and we're not averse to meeting with agencies. Just realize our time is limited, and over half of our business is direct client consulting. So we need to keep that up. But please don't ask us to fly out to your agency. That's a great expense. We'd love to do it, but Jerry and I have discovered that free consulting is a bad business model. In terms of who should be the lead for your agency, generally a lot of agencies have a chief marketing officer. Generally it's a senior account person, or if it's a smaller agency, the president or the owner of the agency. And don't have, as a lot of agencies do, like 6 or 7 leads. We're never sure who's talking to us, and sometimes it's inconsistent. The right frequency for contact, I'll tell you the wrong frequency for contact. Some agencies send us an email every week, and that's just too much. Again, there's 9,000 agencies in the database there. So when you should contact us is when something big happens, when you win a piece of business, or you hire somebody prominent, and don't just tell us you won, tell us why you won. And we like to get kept up to date. I personally like, Jerry, I don't know about you, but a nice HTML email. What we do is we save those emails, those informational emails, in your file, and it's a great way for us to stay up to date. If you're talking to us every week or every month, I think that's too much unless you're doing amazing things. I say a couple, 2 to 3 times a year is probably adequate for most agencies.
Totally agree.
Dave?
Dave, you may be on mute.
Oh, you're on mute, Dave.
There we go. So a couple of interesting questions. I put the contact information up here for you guys, so people are able to reach out to you directly with your email addresses and so forth there. A couple of questions that have sort of come in over the transom here. One that was interesting was, are final decisions by agency selection generally close in your experience, especially over the last 12 months, or is there a clear winner in most cases? And then the next part of that, are there top reasons for selection? Experience, creative ideas, execution, chemistry?
Let me answer the first question. I've probably done close to 200 reviews in the last 15 years or so, and I'd say in the finals, we like to have 3 in the finals, sometimes 4. 3 is much easier to deal with. Generally, somebody rises to the top I'd say out of every 4 pitches, 3 times it's pretty. They've won by a margin. Sometimes it's just a shootout. Those are probably about 25% of the instances, and it's pretty close. Dave, I'm sorry, what was the second part of that question?
So the second part was the top reasons for selection: experience, creative ideas, execution, chemistry. It's a direct question. So it's sort of, I guess, the top reasons for selection in the long list. Let's take it from that perspective.
Okay, the long list, first is the quality of materials, and then we love the letter. We like to have we think an RFI is very compartmentalized and never gives an agency a chance to rise above the various compartments of information. We love to see passion. We love to see somebody who has a real understanding of the brand. That really helps. A very well-constructed less is more RFI tends to win. Our RFIs tend to be 12 to 14 questions. Some agencies do 125 pages in response. Some do 30. We like the brief ones. And again, it's a combination of the response and just having the right experience. It's just dovetailing with exactly what the client needs. However, we do note that often people who look good in RFI form at chemistry meetings sometimes look very different.
Well, one of the things, that's really interesting feedback. One of the things that we hear a lot from agencies in our position is around the creation of agency videos for these submissions rather than just a standard cover letter. Are you guys seeing much more of a trend of that? And if so, is that being welcomed or?
We don't like agency videos, by the way. Our feeling is if you want to make a commercial, make it for one of your clients. We like to see work. We will represent you, and hopefully your RFI will represent you. We think that the videos, showing people are really a bit of an artificial veneer. We know they're expensive. I think it's crazy that some ask you to do a new one for every pitch. Your work speaks volumes about you. We don't want to, the chemistry meeting will give us a chance to engage. Your credentials and capabilities come first, and again, we're just not a big fan and prefer that agencies don't do any kind of personality-driven video.
Well, we've got time for just a couple more questions, or Jerry, if you'd like to elaborate
Jerry,
a little bit on that.
Hogging this.
I'll just elaborate a bit. In our process, if you make it to the chemistry meetings or certainly to the finalist list, we're convinced, and the client is convinced, you could be a great agency for them. So you don't get there if you can't do the work, and they wouldn't be excited about you. And so the differentiator, the ultimate differentiator, oftentimes gets to be enthusiasm, energy, and the degree to which, these are the terms that the client uses, is they get us. And when a marketer feels like they get us, it's because you've done your homework, you've really penetrated the brief and the business challenge, and you've come up with really thoughtful solutions on how they can be helped.
And I will add that big agencies tend to rest on their laurels. They'll show you a bunch of case histories, where smaller agencies tend to do a lot more research and to be a lot more probing about what the client's issues are, and then leading to what Jerry said, they get us and they get our challenges.
Well, to keep things moving along here, guys, and allow everyone to finish on time, including both of you, thank you very much for the opportunity to present to the agencies that attended today. We had certainly a couple of hundred people on the session, so one of the top-rated sessions for the year, and attended certainly. Just as a point of reference, as we talked about in the beginning of the session, we're going to make a copy of the webcast available as a video stream following this session, as well as a copy of the slides from today's session. This will be emailed out tomorrow morning to all attendees with the links to those various assets. So thank you very much for the opportunity to work with both of you guys, Jerry, and thank you, Russell, once again.